Hello, and welcome to this installment of Bruin Family Insights, which is UCLA Parent and Family Program's virtual discussion series. Every month, we bring you a new discussion about a topic that is important to our Bruin families. My name is Kayla Albano, and I am the Associate Director for Parent and Family Programs at UCLA. And today, I'm very excited to chat with you all about UCLA admission, which is definitely a hot topic that we get a lot of questions about. Tonight, I'm also very excited to have our two panelists with us today, and we will be introducing them. Their names are Gary, and he is the Director of UCLA Admission, as well as Mike, who is the Deputy Director. And so Gary and Mike, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and just share a little bit more about yourselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Drish, and as Kayla mentioned, I'm the Deputy Director of Undergraduate Admission. I've been with UCLA. This is my fourth year and a little over 15 years of experience in undergraduate admissions at public and private universities from the East to the West Coast. In my role specifically here at UCLA, I work with our staff that plan our events and help support the professional development of our staff. We have a large and varied staff, as you can imagine, to meet the demand placed on us when it comes to admission, and do a little bit of recruitment. If anyone's listening in from San Francisco or Marin County, that's my territory, so I visit the high schools and connect with prospective students in those parts of California. So happy to be here today.
Hello, everybody. My name is Gary Clark. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Admission here at UCLA. I've been at UCLA for about 6 years now. I've been in the admission profession for about 20 years. I've really enjoyed my time at UCLA. As all of you probably know, this is a pretty easy place to fall in love with. But we are responsible as an office for the recruitment, application review, admission, and enrollment of all undergraduate students at UCLA. So we evaluate applications in both the freshman and transfer admission process and help to enroll our class each year. So excited to be with you tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to the discussion that we have today. But to get us started, I do want to pose a question to both of you. So why do you think UCLA is one of the most sought after public institutions, not just in the United States, but really around the world?
Well, I'll start on that. I think, to me, that UCLA really excels in a number of different areas. And I think when we look at our kind of competition, if you will, other institutions that students are considering, if they're considering UCLA, I really think the opportunity to have an undergraduate program that offers over 125 majors, over 90 minors, in a very residential community where 3 years of housing is guaranteed for our incoming freshmen, 1 year guaranteed for our incoming transfer students, all in the backdrop of Los Angeles with the amazing research opportunities, the extraordinary athletics programs. I think there are a number of universities that might be able to claim excellence in a couple of those areas, but there really aren't many that excel in all of them in the way that we do. So I think that package together really is very appealing for our students. So certainly something that makes our job easy in terms of talking about UCLA.
Yeah, I would just echo what Gary said. I think that one of the things that really stands out to me is our location. We're on the Pacific Rim. We're in the most populous state in the nation. And so you put that combination together, there's always been a draw to California. And so UCLA benefits from everything Gary mentioned, and also being in a city, in a state that has always been a destination for people from across the globe and across the country. And as he mentioned, that makes our jobs a little easier. Because people are always interested and open to learning more about UCLA and see if it aligns with what they're looking for in their higher ed pursuits.
Absolutely. No shortage of people interested in learning more about UCLA. And one of the things that we heard in our RSVPs for this event is someone actually commented, admissions is such a mystery. And so to get us started in a little bit more of the meat of the conversation, I'd love if you could share the traditional admissions cycle for UCLA. What does this overall process look like for you all from beginning to end?
Sure. So I think the formal beginning of this process, and we could take this in lots of different directions, but really looking at our involvement in the process, students will, for example, right now the application is open. So for students that are seniors or community college students that are interested in transferring for fall 2019, the process is starting now. They can begin filling out the application and get familiar with the personal insight questions and start to think about what they want to share with us in the UC application. Applications are submitted in the window between November 1st and November 30th. Doesn't matter when you submit the application, whether it's November 2nd or November 30th, it's all going to get read at the same time. But that's the period where students will formally submit the application. We start reviewing applications right after that deadline passes and really don't stop reading applications until we release admission decisions, which is usually late March for freshmen and late April for transfer students. And all of our decisions go out at the same time, so they don't trickle out, they all come out for each of those two populations at the same time. So during the cycle, there's a lot of kind of sitting and waiting on the part of students and families while we do our work on our end of evaluating and reading all that information that the student has shared with us. Once they're informed of their admission decision, freshmen have until May 1 to decide whether or not they want to enroll at UCLA. There's a right choice there. And transfer students have until June 1st to decide whether or not they'd like to enroll. And then ultimately over the summer, we're just formalizing things, getting final documentation, and the students enroll the following fall. Recruitment and things like that happen a good bit prior to when the student submits the application, but we can talk a little bit more about that later.
Great, thanks so much. Sounds like you all are about to be pretty busy here in a couple months.
Yes.
All right. Well, as we're talking about that, we both, or all of us know rather, that UCLA did have a pretty record-breaking cycle for admission in the 2018-2019 academic year for that year. So how does your team work to manage and just go through this process efficiently and thoughtfully? It definitely sounds like it's a lot to take on.
Yeah, no question. I mean, first and foremost, we are absolutely humbled by the volume of applications that we receive. The fact that that many students from across California and across the country and around the world are considering UCLA. It's exciting, it's humbling, and absolutely there's a workload that comes along with that. But one of the reasons we're in admissions is because we enjoy reviewing applications, that especially for students that we've been recruiting and we've been getting to know. And so we value the part of the process that is reviewing applications, even with the size and scope that we're talking about. One of the benefits of working at UCLA is we're not the only two that value that process. And it starts from the chancellor and the provost to our vice provost for enrollment management. They all are very supportive of ensuring that we have the actual human resources to get through those 137,000 applications last year. And so every single application is reviewed twice by a person because we have that investment from the university in both the staff in our office and outside readers. And so the staff in our office are those admission counselors who are out recruiting and visiting colleges and high schools. They're answering emails, meeting with families when they come and visit campus, presenting to different campus constituencies, like our parents' council and others. The staff are involved in doing that. But then our outside readers are individuals who are current college counselors in high schools. They could be UCLA staff members who are involved in a wide variety of roles on campus. And in many cases, they've been doing it for maybe 5, 10 or more years. So they're pretty experienced readers. And so we really take that seriously, the professionalism of those reading those applications of students who have applied to UCLA. And so it's a tight timeline, as Gary mentioned. We start reviewing in December. We release admissions decisions in late March. To get through that volume of applications, which no other university has to get through that many in that time frame. That's why we need that large number of readers to do it. But every application is reviewed at least twice. In many cases, an application may get a third or fourth review. And a lot of time and effort goes into not only reading, but ultimately deciding who we will select to be in the first year class or the transfer incoming class. And for the transfer class, we start that review as we're wrapping up the freshman review and usually release transfer decisions about a month after we release freshman decisions. So the reading doesn't stop at the end of March. We just switch our attention to our transfer students, which is a volume that is larger than most overall application volumes for universities across the country. So that's another great success as well.
Absolutely. And I know some colleagues who are part of that process and just really enjoy it. It's definitely a busy time, but an exciting time for everyone to be a part of, for sure. We actually, like I mentioned before, did get some submitted questions ahead of today's discussion, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about one of our first questions, which is still related to what we've been discussing. And it's from Ann C., and she asks, how important is the personal essay in the admission process? How many admissions folks actually read the essay, which we talked a little bit about that already. So if you want to just talk about that piece more generally, I think that would be great.
Yeah, so when we're reading all of those applications, the readers are reading the entire application. So the UC application is made up of many specific sections. There's a self-reported academic history, there's standardized test scores, there's extracurricular activities, work experience, volunteerism and service elements that students tell us about. And then there's also the personal insight questions. And for those of you who may not be as familiar, the personal insight questions on the UC application, an applicant basically can look at a list of 8 questions and choose 4 of them to answer. Any 4 that they want. We have no preference, we have no favorites. The benefit of the UC app is we were all involved in developing it. We like all 8 questions. So as long as the student wants to write an answer to 4 of those 8 questions, they can't go wrong in the 4 that they choose. And as you can imagine, with the volume of applications we receive, the vast majority of them are academically prepared for UCLA. So their classroom performance, their standardized test scores, the rigor of their curriculum, they have done what it takes to be successful in the college classroom at UCLA or any of the leading universities across the country. So how we're able to start really differentiating students, identifying ways that they have maybe contributed to their community or they start to tell their story beyond the academic realm is in the extracurricular activities, but most importantly, the personal insight questions. We named them personal insight questions because our goal is to learn more about the student, to gain some personal insight into who they are, what they're all about, what drives them, what they're passionate about. And as you can imagine, they're very important in the review because if most of the people who apply have somewhat similar academic successes on testing and in their academic performance and their rigor, where students start to talk about themselves and who they are is where they do start to differentiate themselves in one way or another from the other applicants. And so the personal insight questions absolutely are critically important to the process because that's usually where a student will start to separate themselves from some of the other applicants because of something that they share, some insight that we gain. The more personal they are, the more perspective they give us. That's part of the holistic review. We want to envision a student at UCLA succeeding on this campus. And part of that is their personal narrative telling us a little bit about who they are, what they've been doing with their life up until this point. So a very important part of the process.
Sounds like it. Thank you. Well, we know that, as you said, there's so many applications and so many folks hoping to get to UCLA, but not everybody gets admitted. So Todd B asks, how is the waitlist used and what are the realistic chances of admission for those finding themselves on the list?
Sure. So the waitlist is kind of an enrollment management tool, and the purpose of it is to ensure that we really enroll the size class that we need to each year. We want to ensure that every available space for fall enrollment is utilized. So each year we make a number of admission offers and expect that a certain percentage of students will say yes to those offers. Not every student that's admitted to UCLA will choose to enroll, hard to believe, but students do choose to go elsewhere sometimes. So what we do each year is we want by May 1 to have an idea of where we sit for freshmen in terms of SIRs, or students that have committed to enroll at UCLA. If we know that over the summer, a certain number of students will not enroll, they may choose to go elsewhere, they may get off a wait list at another institution, we want to ensure that we're sitting on May 1 at a number that will allow us to achieve the kind of enrollment target that we have set for the fall, to make sure that we enroll every possible student that we can and that we fill every space that we possibly can. That allows us to reduce the possibility of over-enrollment. We want to be sure that we kind of hit that mark and achieve that goal without overshooting the target each year. So the wait list is designed for those students who we think are just amazing students, and we wish we had more space to be able to accommodate them, but we run out of space in terms of the admission offers that we've made. The wait list allows us to offer students an opportunity to be on the wait list. They have to opt in, so there's an affirmative step that the students have to take once they've been offered a spot on the wait list. They will opt into the wait list by April 15th for freshmen. And then if after May 1 we determine we're a little short, we need more students in engineering, we need more students in a particular academic area, whatever that particular need might be, then we may make some offers to students from the wait list. But there's some years where we hit that target by May 1 and we don't need to utilize the wait list. So how many students are offered admission from the wait list or whether or not we go to the wait list can change from one year to the next. And the last thing I'll say related to that question is we always take a little bit of exception with the phrase wait list, because it's not a list. It's not a ranked list from 1 to whatever the number is, and your number 57. If we determine that we're going to go to the wait list, and let's say we do need engineers, then we're going to look at all the students who've opted in that are students that are in engineering, and then we're going to reconsider that group and determine who are the students that we might like to offer admission to. So students should opt in if they're offered the opportunity to opt in on the wait list, and then they should take advantage of the narrative space that we give to tell us a little bit about how they did in their senior year and give us a little bit more information about their interest in UCLA.
Got it. Thank you so much. We have an interesting question that was submitted live from Julie S. And she asks, how can you tell if an applicant writes the essay or might use one of the services that writes an essay for a fee?
So believe it or not, after reading a significant number of essays or answers to the personal insight questions, we've gotten pretty good at identifying what a 17-year-old voice sounds like. And the minute it reads more like a 40-year-old lawyer or a 35-year-old consultant, we have a feeling that someone probably has had some influence over the student's writing. Now, the key thing in most cases, that's not to the detriment of the student, because we know that the student maybe didn't have a choice, or they might have been best of intentions, they got some feedback on their essay. Parents can go in with a red pen or the track changes, and before you know it, the voice is lost, and all comes from a good place. At the end of the day, our main goal with the personal insight questions is to gain insight about the student. And so our focus is content. Are we learning more about them? We're not reading the personal insight question answers to judge their grammar ability, their sentence structure, their ability to write a good transition, because it's not an essay. That's a big difference between the UC application and the common application, where students are actually asked to write essays. And most individuals, and Gary and I have both worked at Common App schools along with UC schools, there's a different focus when you're reading a Common App essay. It's like you're looking at an essay. You're looking at a written kind of statement that is supposed to be in that form. But the UC application is asking for an answer to a question. One of the best ways that a lot of our colleagues at the UC describe that is, think of the personal insight questions like how you would respond to a question in an interview. You probably wouldn't start an interview response with a quote. If you're meeting with someone, you probably wouldn't start with some long-winded narrative like you would an English essay. And so as students and anyone assisting them in the process think about, the goal is content, to get to know them, about who they are. It's not to judge their written ability like an English teacher would. That's where students can save some time and effort by not kind of attempting to make it sound like an essay, but just giving us important content.
And I think one thing I would add to that, we certainly can, I think, hear a student's voice and what they share in the personal insight question. So I agree with what Mike said there. I think it's also important to keep in mind what we don't ask for in the UCLA application. We do not collect letters of recommendation, and we do not interview students. So the most important thing that can come out of the personal insight questions is authenticity. Like, we want to hear the student's voice, because otherwise what they're sharing in the application all fits in kind of a matrix or a grid. It's grades, it's curriculum, it's activities, it's work, it's hours, it's leadership roles. It's all of those things that fit neatly into boxes. What we want are the things in between all of that, to hear the student's voice. And so it's important that students really make sure that when they respond to those questions, they feel comfortable with the voice they're using and the content that they're sharing, because in many ways, that's the only chance we get to really get to know the student and how they respond to those kinds of questions in the application.
Great. All right, so we are going to jump into more of the submitted questions that we have. And one that we do have is from Leo C., who is asking if applications are looked upon differently based on folks' desired majors or interests. So I'm wondering if you can quickly chat about that a little bit.
Sure, this one's pretty quick and easy. So if students are applying to a major in the College of Letters and Science, the major plays absolutely no role in the selection process. So whether they apply undecided, biology, history, business economics, how they're read and their likelihood of being admitted is no different from one major to another. It's only if they're applying for admission to one of our specialty schools, engineering, theater, film and television, arts and architecture, music, or nursing, that there's an additional review of the application. And in all of those cases, except for engineering, there's a supplemental application that's submitted directly to the school and is reviewed by the faculty, who ultimately recommend students for admission to our office, and then we ultimately issue the decision to the student. So generally speaking, for students applying to majors in the College of Letters and Science, major is not does not play a role in the process. It's only if they're applying to one of the specialty schools that's going to be part of the consideration.
Got it. We have a couple folks, Elena M. and Nadine E. asking, what is the academic or extracurricular profile of the current freshman class? So give us a basic overview of who we're looking at in the incoming class.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, as a part of the holistic review, we get to know the students really well. And so obviously, these are very academically talented students. They have taken the most rigorous curriculum offered in their school setting, whatever that may be, and they have performed at a level that would ensure to us that they are ready to thrive in the UCLA classroom. Students also have prepared for the standardized tests that they're taking, SAT or ACT. We have no preference either one, and they're performing at a level that is where we would expect them to perform as well. And then on the personal side, in terms of extracurriculars, Gary, I think, said this earlier, we're really looking for quality over quantity. So our goal here is the quality of the students' engagement, their impact. It's not a certain number of clubs or organizations, or whether or not they chose a certain way to pursue that, be it, like, say, student government over performing arts, or work experience supporting their family over clubs and activities. There's no right or wrong way to do this, as long as students are making an impact, making a difference in whatever they're doing. In some cases, that can be leadership, it can be being a very active member. We want to see students doing that, and the good news is the vast majority of students applying and those selected absolutely have found a way to balance rigorous academic performance by being an involved active member, whatever it is they love to do or need to do with their free time.
No one way to describe a UCLA student, right?
They are a complex group, and so there's no one way to define a UCLA student or the students that are admitted. Absolutely, a group of individuals for sure.
All right. Well, a lot of folks were asking about how the admissions process works for approaching non-resident or underrepresented communities who apply to UCLA. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in these next few questions. And the first is actually from Delia G., who asks, what does UCLA plan to do? Oh, I'm so sorry. The first one is from Paul M., who asks, would you explain the steps UCLA takes to ensure a blind admissions process? How does the UCLA process compare to the way it's done at other universities, both public and private?
Sure. So I think the way that we read applications, and Mike and I have both worked at other institutions, and I can honestly tell you the way we read apps is more similar than it is different than the way that we read at some of the private institutions that we've been a part of. I worked at a liberal arts college, and we're as thorough in reading applications here as we were at my previous institution. To touch on the 2 points, the two particular populations that you brought up, the enrollment of non-resident students at UCLA and throughout the UC system is certainly something we get a lot of questions about. That really came as a result of significant budget cuts in 2008 to the UC system, and the system made a decision to increase the enrollment of non-resident students, in part to address the financial shortage as a result of the cuts in the state budget. our approach at UCLA was that we were not going to decrease the enrollment of California residents at UCLA. We essentially got bigger as an institution. So the enrollment of non-resident students hasn't displaced any California residents from enrollment at UCLA. We've just chosen to increase the size of the incoming freshman and transfer class to accommodate the non-resident students that we need to enroll. Now, that said, I think it's overall a very positive thing for the entire community here at UCLA. The diversity of perspective, the diversity that these students bring to the academic experience, to classroom discussions, to the residential experience, I think benefits all students. So I think it's something that while the motive initially was something that was response to some of the cuts that we saw, the community's really been enriched for the enrollment of all of our California residents and maintaining that number, but also supplementing that with the enrollment of students from out of state and abroad. Oh, and in terms of underrepresented students, you know, I think diversity is something that is a real hallmark of UCLA. I think it's one of our greatest points of pride, and being able to offer an education that you know, provides the kind of excellence and the kind of diversity that our undergraduate students offer is something that we're very proud of. There's something in California called Prop 209, which means we can't actively consider race and ethnicity in evaluating an application or making an admission decision. But we are interested in students who are, you know, students from low-income backgrounds, students who are first in their family to go to college, students come from different parts of California, from underrepresented geographic communities within California. But overall, I think it's the diversity of students from those backgrounds, from racially and ethnically underrepresented groups, in addition to students from more majority populations, that really make for the kind of diverse undergraduate experience that offers those kinds of perspectives in a classroom that everybody benefits and learns from.
Absolutely. And you actually answered the other couple of questions that we had about this with your answer. So thank you for sharing that information. Another big question that we get is all around UCLA and whether we have a legacy policy here. Quite a few folks asked this specifically around whether having a sibling enrolled increases a student's chance of getting in. So if you could just generally address what is UCLA's legacy policy? Do we even have one?
Again, there's a pretty straightforward response on this one. The answer is no, and that is something that is probably more different than, you know, from what other institutions do. We don't even ask the question in the UC application, and this is a decision that was made by the faculty and by the Board of Regents years ago to say that we really didn't want to consider legacy as a part of the admission process at the UC. So we don't have any knowledge of whether a student has a parent or a grandparent or a sibling who has attended or is currently attending UCLA. So it is a complete non-factor in the review of applications here. So I'm happy for siblings and people that are already part of the Bruin family to be excited and interested in applying to UCLA, but the fact that they have a family member who's attended is not something that's known or considered in the admission process.
Great to clarify, most definitely. We've also gotten a number of questions around students from the same area or the same high school. So we'll transition into a little bit of that right now. And we actually have a live question from Emily V, who asks, are all applications from the same school read at the same time? If so, is there a limit to the amount of applicants you can accept from a certain area? And we actually had a question from Delia G that related to that as well.
Yeah, a little insight around how we review. So when I mentioned that we're reading applications, we're actually reading a random assortment of applications on any day that you're a reader. So we don't read specifically by a school group or by any geographic region or any other type of student. Your reading queue is essentially a queue of applications that can come from a wide variety of locations and schools all over. So when you're reading, the application that we have, the information, is all what we need to make kind of a relevant decision or a recommendation when we're reading the application. There are certain high schools that do have high school profiles that are created by the school. If that is something that was provided, that would be attached to the application. If not, we have a number of other data points that we're able to have available to understand high school context. If it's a public high school, there's a lot of great information in California and across the nation that's collected as a part of different processes. So we feed that information into our system. So the reader, even if there were 20 applications from a high school that were all read by 20 different individuals, each of those readers have the same information available to them about that student within the context of their school. So we're not reading all of the student applicants from one school at the same time, but rest assured the read is the same high quality read for each of those students. And at the end of the process, something that we do is we do look at kind of the trending decisions by different school groups. That's something that Gary and I and a few other senior staff members would do. And we essentially do that to look at the trending decisions and say, are these logical? If we were in that school community, if we were the college counselor in that environment, and they called us up and said, why did UCLA make this decision or that decision? We have the confidence to defend the decisions that were made based on that read. And the good news is every year when we go through those school groups to do that quality control check, we make very few changes because our readers did such a great job of reading the file, even though they, like I said, it could have been 20 applications read by 20 different individuals. So I mentioned, for example, I recruit in San Francisco. I don't read every applicant from San Francisco. That would be too many for one person to read. So that's one of the reasons why we don't have that process like smaller schools would have with a territory manager who does that read.
And I think to follow up on that, there is no limit to the number that we'll admit from a high school. We don't have any kind of cap, and it can vary significantly from one year to the next, not only based on how many students apply, but if we have one year when 50% of the students applying from that school applied to engineering or theater, film, and television, which are both quite selective programs, that might impact the admit rate for that school in a given year. But each year there is absolutely no cap assigned to any school community that we're reading.
Thanks for adding that.
Yep.
Thank you both. We have a lot of questions that we received about AP courses specifically as well. Teresa M asks, how do different high schools get reviewed if some offer AP courses and others do not? So you spoke a little bit to how you look at them, but now more specifically AP.
Yeah, so this gets at the context of the school environment. So we never penalize a student in terms of for where they go to school. We want to understand the context of their school. So if their school has an AP curriculum, advanced placement, if it has IB, International Baccalaureate, school may have honors or accelerated courses, and there are many schools across the country that have removed all of those courses and everything kind of is the same level of rigor as the school outlines it. So when we approach an application, we need to understand the curriculum, the rigor or the opportunities that the student had within that curriculum, and that's what matters most to us. So if a student has attended a school that offers AP courses, we would review them in the context of knowing that was the rigor that the school offered. Were there any limitations on the number of AP courses a student could take? Many high schools like to put that in place. So we need to understand how many courses were offered to them, what were the opportunities connected with that, and then what did the student ultimately choose to enroll in terms of courses. So the volume of AP courses they take, the types of courses they take will vary depending on the school setting, the possible major they applied into, and what's offered. And so it's a wide variety of factors that go into that, but the curriculum a student chooses, as long as it's what's offered at their school and it's college preparatory, that's what matters most to us because we want to ensure we're setting them up for success once they get to UCLA.
And I'm gonna add to that and answer another question that comes up a lot when this question comes up. Is it better to get an A in a regular class or a B in an AP class? And the non-sarcastic answer to that question is honestly, at UCLA, it's better to get an A in an AP class because you have to think about not only the volume of applications, but the quality of applications that we receive. So if a student has access to AP courses and has the ability to take advantage of some of those classes, they should do that. They don't need to max out the curriculum, but they need to really be seen as challenging themselves and taking advantage of the rigorous courses available to them. So don't overwhelm yourself, don't completely overload yourself, but generally speaking, we'd like to see students stepping up and taking that more rigorous program.
Great, thank you. And we will probably circle back to some more AP questions as we get through the night. So be thinking about that. We've received a lot of questions that just address some common misconceptions about the UCLA admission process. So we'll chat a little bit about those now. And the first one comes from Kimlee Y. And she asks, and I know you'll probably address this a little bit more specifically about what this looks like, but she asks, why is there a DACA section on the application? Are there a minimum number of DACA students that have to be admitted to UCLA?
Sure. So the short answer is no. There is no minimum number of DACA students that need to be admitted. We don't have any targets associated with students who are DACA or undocumented students. The reason why that question is asked in the application is really that if a student is admitted to any UC campus, that campus can provide any kind of support services that student might need once they enroll. So we collect the information, not necessarily because it plays a huge role in the admission process. I think we always talk about context and we talk about understanding a student's circumstance. And if a student is DACA or undocumented and they choose to share that in the application, that's part of the context of understanding the student's kind of circumstances and background. Doesn't play a direct role in the process in terms of a target associated with those populations, but it allows us that if the student is admitted to UCLA, that we can connect them with any resources on campus to support them in their experience.
Thank you. And the other question related to some misconceptions is from Delia G, and she asks, how does the acceptance of student athletes impact the number of students UCLA accepts based on academics?
That's a helpful question because I think there's a lot of misconceptions around student athletes, and I use that term intentionally, student athletes. The students who are competing at UCLA as Division I athletes in our sports are students who absolutely have earned the right to be admitted to UCLA. A few quick facts: our student athletes are extremely successful once they get here in terms of their academic performance. We have the second highest GPA of student athletes in the Pac-12 and one of the highest in the country. Extremely high graduation rates, and that's a testament to the ability of these students to balance the academic rigor of the UCLA classroom with what they bring in terms of talent to perform with the different sports and teams that we have on campus. And so that's what we mean by context and holistic review. When we're looking at an applicant, we want to understand how they're spending their time. And the students who apply as student athletes are obviously extremely dedicated to the sport that they've been pursuing in many cases since they were very young. And so we want to take that into account, but as a part of that, we're still looking at their academic performance. And we review applications for student athletes considering, are they able to balance their high school kind of sports with their academic performance, and in many cases a rigorous high school environment. And that gives us some insight into how will they be able to perform at a high intensity Division I Pac-12 school like UCLA. I think that in and of itself is a benefit that we have a student athlete applicant pool that has been able to do that. Not every Division I school has an applicant pool like we do, and so that differentiates UCLA. The other part is our Division of Intercollegiate Athletics has incredible resources to ensure students are able to thrive here academically, and we know that based on that success in high school, that then once they get here, mainly because of the dedication to the sport and the time that takes, they will need some assistance, maybe making up an exam or getting some study assistance because they couldn't be in every single class. And the good news is UCLA has invested the resources to ensure those already successful students are able to continue to thrive through their 4 years at UCLA.
I'll just add one very, very quick point to that. Two quick things. One, there's a faculty committee that actually reviews students that are being considered as recruited athletes. So there's a strong faculty voice in this process as well. Second thing is, I think that the common misconception is around the number as well. We will enroll a class of probably 6,000 freshmen this year, and probably 140 or 150 of those are student athletes. So it's a very small number relative to the overall population of students that we're enrolling.
Thank you. A lot of families who are watching tonight are actually families who have prospective Bruins. So this is a little bit of a different audience than we typically have on our Bruin Family Insights episode. And they have a lot of questions about how to prepare their student or help them prepare for this process. I'm going to put two submitted questions together. We had one that asked, how can our student best prepare her college application for the UC? And then similarly, what are some major admission challenges that students experience? So how can you best prepare, and what are some common challenges?
I think I can take the part about preparing, because we're getting ready to talk to hundreds of students, thousands of students throughout the fall, where we get that exact same question. And in terms of preparing, there's kind of, like I mentioned earlier, the two parts of the application. There's the academic portion and the personal side of the application. In terms of the academic side, as long as the student has taken a rigorous curriculum and challenged themselves in their school environment and performed at a high level in that curriculum, they have prepared themselves to be competitive for admission on the academic side. That, combined with strong performance on the standardized tests, either the SAT or the ACT, will ensure that they will be competitive on the academic side. And more information about that's on our website, where we list our middle 50% ranges for the test scores and things like that. But that's all information you can find without hearing from me or Gary directly. Where I mentioned earlier, a lot of the decisions come down to what students share on the personal side. And so we want to ensure that a student is prepared for our selective admission process. They need to be an involved, active member of their school community or their greater community, or contributing or having an impact on their household or the work experience they have. Essentially, one of the words I love to use is having an impact. Because if you have an impact on what you love to do, you're also going to have a pretty easy time writing answers to the 4 personal insight questions, because you're going to have great experience, insight to share, and you'll want to tell us a little bit more about yourself. So how can a student best prepare for the UC application and for our selective admission process? It's balancing that academic success with what they've been able to do kind of in terms of make an impact on the personal side, and telling that story, sharing that insight and perspective. Believe it or not, there are a lot of students who can't balance those two things or don't do that in the application. And that's ultimately, those are the students we ultimately will have to say no to. And those who are really adept at doing that are the ones that will ultimately be offered a space in the freshman class and transfer class.
Yeah, and I think, to talk a little bit about how the transfer spin on that too, I think I mentioned we'll enroll probably about 6,000 freshmen this year. We'll also enroll, around 3,200 transfer students. So transfers are a big part of the undergraduate population and a huge part of the value system at UCLA. About 93% of our transfers come from California community colleges. And the way that those students should prepare for our process is very similar to what Mike described in terms of the freshman process and being active and doing high quality academic work. But we look very closely at major preparation when students are applying as transfer students. They apply specifically to a major, and we need to see that they've completed all the appropriate prerequisites and major prep so that they can jump in at junior standing at UCLA and really finish in 2 years once they're here. But same kind of holistic process as what we described for the freshmen. The challenge, I think I'll interpret the question in terms of challenge from our end of, it's not, I think the volume gets a lot of the attention, 113,000 freshman applications this past year and about 24,000 transfer applications. The challenge is the volume for sure, but the challenge is the quality of students that are applying to UCLA, which is a wonderful thing. We're happy to have so many great students applying. But what that means is, as the quality of students that we admit each year improves, the quality of students that we're not admitting each year improves. And that's a really challenging thing for us. It's not easy to say no to good students, but when ultimately we admitted this year about 16,000 freshmen, there are probably 2-3 times that are quality students that could come to UCLA and be successful. We just don't have space to take all of them. So sometimes those decisions that don't go the way of the student can be frustrating for families, but you have to understand that the quality of applicants that we receive dictates that no matter what we do, unfortunately, we're going to have to say no to good students. We just don't have enough space for all of them.
Got it. And you actually answered a live question that we got from Daniela M. When you talked about transfer applications. So she was really curious about that process. So thank you for reading our viewers' minds. Appreciate that.
Another trick of the admission profession.
All right.
I'm sure. Okay, again, with our prospective families, lots of questions about just specific components of the college prep process, the application process that they want to know about. So we'll go through some of these. And like I said, we'll come back to that AP test question. So I have a few of those. Ann C wants to know if a student is enrolled in an AP class but chooses not to take the exam, does that impact their admission? And then Braden H wants to know how AP test results affect the admission process. So how do test results affect it? And then if they choose not to take the test but take the class, does that affect it?
The first answer is pretty simple in terms of if a student has taken the class and they choose to or do not take the exam, or vice versa. They took the exam but never had the class, it has no impact either way. The goal is just to see what is the student done. And so we're looking at their curriculum, their courses, and their grades, and then we'll also look if they list any of those secondary test scores, such as the AP exams, whether or not they're signed up to take them or they've actually taken them. We're not comparing the two lists. Our goal is just to see that a student has that rigor, and then if they have secondary testing, which is not required, just another part of the application where they can list those exams, they can do so, but we're not reading into it beyond that. And so that's an easy question, and students do not need to stress about that whatsoever. We actually recommend students really probably should not report their AP test scores unless they have a 3 or higher. That's kind of across the UC, students can get credit toward their degree for a 3 or higher on the AP exams. So honestly, a 3 or higher is not going to be to their detriment whatsoever, and it doesn't have to line up with the courses that they took in school. And Kayla, will you remind me, the second question was this, what did he ask specifically?
Specifically the role of AP test results in the admission process. So you addressed that as well. And we also got a live question from Ann C about if a student gets takes an AP class and exam, but there's a disparity between the grade and the test score. What does that look like? But you answered that as well. So perfect. I think we covered the AP piece pretty well. And then we do have a live question that's transfer related from Mike S. He says, speaking of community colleges, could you talk about TAP and its advantages to being admitted to UCLA?
Sure. So TAP, for those who aren't familiar with the acronym, because we live in a world of acronyms, that's the Transfer Alliance Program. These are honors programs at a large number of community colleges throughout California that we have a partnership with at UCLA. If a student participates in TAP and completes the TAP curriculum, which is specific to whatever community college they're attending, then they're given some additional consideration in the admission process. And the reasoning behind that is that they're completing major prep. They're certainly high quality students in terms of the grades that they're earning, or at least we hope that they are. But also the addition of participating in the honors program and being a part of that partnership in the TAP program gives us the ability to look at them a little bit more closely in the process. So the advantages of TAP are certainly worth considering. If a student has access to that program, we're able to consider those students for a second choice major, which is not something that we're able to do all the time. So a student who's participating in TAP gets that consideration. But I don't want students who don't have that program available to them at a community college that they attend to feel as though they're at a disadvantage. Those students are all read in exactly the same way and given much of the same consideration. Just participating in TAP means we know that their performance is slightly elevated as a result of participation in that honors program.
Thank you. We have a couple questions about standardized testing. One was submitted, actually a couple of folks submitted this question. Shirley Y and Ekaterina G ask why the UC still require SAT essays, but many colleges do not. So we'll talk about that one. And then Emily V asks, does taking a certain standardized test multiple times look bad? So why does the UC still ask for essays? And then does taking a test more than once affect a student's application?
So good questions. I'll take the first one of those. So yes, UC is one of the last standing institutions in the country that still requires students either take the essay as a part of the SAT or the writing component as a part of the ACT. That is something that is a part of faculty policy. That's not a decision that's made by the admission offices on the individual campuses. I can tell you that the faculty and the President Napolitano, has said that that's something that the faculty are actively looking at. Now, what does that mean down the road? I can't say. I can't commit to that one way or another, but I can say it's something that certainly has been in the news quite a bit lately, and that the President and the faculty at UC are taking a close look at how UC, or whether or not UC will continue to require that in the future.
And one of the reasons that the faculty supported having the essay and writing portion is because that is a timed exam, and to see how students actually do write and perform in a timed circumstance is very similar to what they would be doing in, midterms and finals in college. And so there's some kind of thought that went into that process, and just like any good faculty member, they want to give a lot of thought and consideration to whether or not they want to reverse that decision. And knowing that faculty help drive that decision, whereas at many universities it's an admissions office decision, helps hopefully explain why the UC will take a little more time to come to a conclusion on that. So that's an important thing to note. There is some value in it, just the faculty have to determine if they believe that's still there.
And taking standardized tests multiple times, does that hurt a student? Yeah,
basically, no, it does not. We look at the one highest total or the one highest composite score that a student scores on the ACT or the SAT. And as long as we have that information, that's what matters most. We are not super scoring the exams, which means we don't take one score from one exam administration and one score from another exam administration. We're looking at one total, one composite. And if that came from 2 or 3 or 4 different times that they took it, as long as we see the one highest, that's our focus. So students don't need to stress or worry about the volume of times they take the tests. What I will say is they shouldn't be taking them multiple times just for their own sanity and well-being. I think there are a lot of very well-published studies that show that if you've taken those exams 3 times, that's probably about the most you'd be able to move your score. So I don't think students should really take it more than that, but I say that more for their own well-being versus whether or not it would affect their admission at UCLA.
And one little kind of inside baseball tip on that too. When a reader is looking at the application, they don't even see that the student has taken it multiple times. All they see is that highest composite score or that highest single sitting for the SAT. So they don't even know if the student has taken the exam multiple times.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Thank you. And just so you know, Sarah, who's watching live, says you guys are the best. So they are really enjoying the insight you're sharing tonight.
We'll take it. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, so what do you think the future holds for the university as admission becomes more competitive? And more specifically, Karen W. wants to know if you have any predictions on acceptance rates in the coming year. So what is it going to look like for us coming up?
I think one of the things that really surprises me and Gary every year is the volume of students who apply to UCLA. This past year, we could have never predicted the number of applications we received. That was not even really on our radar. It was we thought there'll probably be an increase because we have more high school students in California. We have growing interest around the country and around the world. So we expect some increase, but not at the level that we experienced this year. So that's one of the challenges we face leading this admissions office is we know that there will probably be increases for a whole host of external reasons, but we never know exactly how big that increase will be. A lot of our sister campuses saw increases as well. A lot of universities across the country have seen that as well, but not all of them have. And so sometimes it is hard to predict where those increases will happen, when they'll happen, what's driving that. I think that UCLA is in a pretty unique position as we started the conversation. And there's a lot of elements that will drive continued interest in UCLA, I think, for a number of years to come. So if I had a crystal ball, I think it would show that UCLA and many of the UC campuses will probably continue to see an increase in applications because there's a growth in population in California and that continued interest in attending a college in California and a place like Los Angeles. And so that will mean as applications increase, if the size of the university stays relatively similar, that we will become more selective. And that's something that really, we don't take that lightly. We want to ensure access and opportunity to as many students as possible, which is why we employ that holistic process to ensure that when we're facing that volume, we're making very wise decisions when it comes to who will ultimately get a seat at UCLA. And those are tough decisions, but with the volume we experience, it's probably not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I think Mike covered a lot of what I would have said. I mean, I'll be very frank with all of you and say, we're not excited about being more selective. This isn't, there are plenty of colleges and universities out there that will say with pride how selective they are and how many apps they've gotten. I think for us, especially as a public flagship institution, the increased selectivity is not something that we're really excited about. Certainly not something that we're trying to manufacture. I think that low admit rate is really just a product of the volume of applications that we receive, the high yield, meaning the high percentage of students that will choose to enroll if admitted to UCLA, those things lead to ultimately, along with whatever the enrollment target happens to be for a given year, leads to this increased selectivity. So I think apps will probably continue to go up, and that selectivity will likely increase. But that's certainly not a result of us trying to lower the admit rate. It's really just a byproduct of the popularity and kind of amazing experience that UCLA has to offer.
Awesome. Well, we are coming to the end of our time together, so I just have a couple more quick questions for you. First, just if you could quickly share how prospective Bruin families can stay informed about UCLA and connected as they prepare for the admission process.
Yeah, that's an easy one. Please go to our website, just admission.ucla.edu/getconnected. And there's an opportunity to provide the information for the student so that any outbound communications we send, a student will be connected to that and will get updates from us periodically. Come to visit campus. We actually provide a page on our website where you can find out who your counselor is for a given high school or community college. So if you want to contact that person directly, you don't have to navigate a phone tree or email an anonymous account. You can actually reach out directly to the person who's responsible for your school community.
I mentioned also that, we go out and we visit, we come to you. So we're going to be at high schools and college fairs across the state, across the country, and around the world. We host evening programs. And so check with your college counselor, look at our website. We're probably going to be in your area or closer to you than Los Angeles might be, depending on where you are. And that's a great way to connect and learn more about UCLA. So we definitely try to make our way to where people are as well. But the website's a great resource.
All right, so last question is going to be a two-parter. The first is just share why you enjoy working in admission. You've both been doing it for a while, so what is it that keeps you there? And just a key takeaway that you would ask families to remember after today's discussion.
I guess I'll start. I was the first person in my family to earn an undergraduate degree, and college was really a pretty transformational experience for me. The opportunity to be a part of kind of demystifying this process, interacting with students, families, and counselors, and helping them to understand and peel the curtain back a little bit and know a little bit more about how we do this work is something that I am as passionate about today as I was when I first got into the profession. So I love it and wouldn't change a thing. The best advice I can give to students is and families, really have a good list. I love UCLA. And I'm glad that you love UCLA, but there are a lot of wonderful colleges and universities out there. And I think you need to be sure that you have a really complete list of schools where you're confident that you're going to be admitted and really match the kind of experience that you're looking for. Take a deep breath, relax. You're gonna be at an institution where you belong and have a wonderful undergraduate experience. I certainly hope that's UCLA, but if it's not, I know students are going to find a good home somewhere.
When I went to college, I was also the first in my family to go to college, and I had family who would come and visit, and I loved showing them around. And someone said, there are tour guides who do that. And I had no idea that was even an option, and so I applied to be a tour guide, and that was my first kind of interaction with the admissions office at my alma mater. And I loved being a tour guide and kind of thought this would be great if you could do this and actually as a full-time job, and then realized there are people in admissions who kind of do that year after year. And so why not explore that? I was a history major. I had a number of options I was considering, but I thought I might as well give it a try. And now, like I said, over 15 years later, I haven't looked back. And so it's been a great experience. What I loved about it, from being a tour guide to what I did today, was helping families and students maneuver the process. Because for most people, they don't live and breathe college admissions. Higher education might not be something they think about on a daily basis. And so why, when they embark on this process, should they suddenly be experts? And that's why we're here, because we do live and breathe this every day, for better or worse. And we love to help families, students, especially those who may be the first in their family to go to college, or the first to consider that college or university that no one has heard of, but is a great find, to help them feel comfortable with that and understand the opportunity, the risks associated, the benefits that can come with that. That is so rewarding, and it's just been a great part of the experience. So the people first and foremost, the people we work with in the profession who do that across the country, and then the people who we're helping as best we can to maneuver the process, is why I just love doing this and love doing it every day. A little bit of advice. This one is for students and parents. If you're listening and you're going to talk to your students later, it's for them to be themselves when they're completing the application. Present who you are, what you're all about, what matters to you, what you're passionate about. Too often people think that there's some mold they have to fill, like UCLA wants this. All UCLA wants, or places like us, is a student, like I said earlier, who is balanced, rigorous academics with giving back, making a difference, finding a way to be impactful. However you've chosen to do that, whoever you are, talk about that, and you will, trust me, you will fare better in the process than trying to make yourself in the mold of the student who got admitted last year, or the older sibling, or the cousin who got admitted a few years ago. Don't go that route. Be true to you, share your story with us and anywhere else you apply, and that ultimately will help you fare better in this selective process. Good luck.
Well, definitely some sage advice. Thank you both so much for sharing your time and your insights with us. We've gone through so many wonderful pieces of what this process looks like for folks, and I know they appreciate it. And to all of you who are watching at home, thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this conversation. If you did submit a question and it was not answered during our discussion tonight, we will follow up with you. Somebody from our office, the Office of Parent and Family Programs, will reach out just to check in and make sure that you feel confident after tonight's discussion. The recording will also be available shortly after we end tonight. So if you need to share it with anyone or go back and watch it, you are definitely welcome to do that. And if you RSVP'd ahead of time for the discussion, we do have a follow-up survey that we would love for you to take just to give us some feedback on this program, and that'll be coming to you in the next few days. We also want to remind you to stay tuned for our Fall 2018 Bruin Family Insights schedule, which will be coming at you in the next month or so. And if you are a new family to UCLA, we want to welcome you and encourage you to watch a previous Bruin Family Insights episode called Transitioning to UCLA, which is all about how to begin the journey of being a Bruin and what that looks like. And that, as well as all of our installments of Bruin Family Insights, are available on our website, which is parents.ucla.edu. We look forward to chatting with you all again soon. We hope you have a great night, and go Bruins.